Belizean workers' rights reasoning. I am Yaya Marin Coleman, and our co-host tonight is Brother Dean Flowers, who is also the president of the Public Service Union. And our guest tonight is our brother Philip Tate. He was our guest last week, and he can come back on before we get sent. I think a lot of knowledge to share. Thanks everyone for showing up tonight. And the conversation will be workers' rights versus state power. Brother Dean, you've been missing. You are with us every other week. How are you being?
Good night, Sister Yaya, and good night to all the participants that is with us tonight. Looking forward to the conversation, Sister Yaya. Yes, I have some very unfortunate other commitments, unfortunately some other commitments that prohibits me from joining the show on a weekly basis, but I'm pretty quite sure that I have been missing out on a lot, and not necessarily those who tune in have been missing out. So I look forward to hearing from Brother Philip tonight as you guys continue the conversation that was started last week.
Respect. Brother Tate, how are you being tonight?
Oh, I keep trying, Sister Yaya. We keep trying to figure out the best way how to avoid COVID and physical distance and follow the protocol. No?
Yes, I tell people I don't like the word try. You either do it or you're not to do it. Seal. You either to do it or you're not to do it. There's no trying.
Well, so, Sister Yaya, I can only try. Others also have to do the same so that we can protect each other.
Well, I just say you to do. You know to try. Yes. You to do a part you there. But
yes.
Sister Melina, Sister Mayana, Sister Trish, everybody, well, I just say only to do because the expectation is that they're really to do. So that's why I say only to do. No, either to do or not to do. So what happened there?
No. It was just because I'm sharing my screen, Sister Yaya.
Okay. All right, good. So what comes to mind, Brother Tate, when you reflected on what we discussed last week, and I shared how important it is for us to see numbers to better understand the conversation or to enhance the conversation when we continue to talk about workers' rights versus state power. What comes to mind for you and why you have this share screen up?
The reason, good night, Sister Yaya. Thanks very much for having me again this week. I can only keep trying to the best of my ability to be able to suggest and to try to educate our people as to what are some of the issues we are trying to deal with and how best we can address it. What I have in front of you, we were talking, because Sister Yaya said, don't give me a percentage, give me a number. So I remove the percentage and I am giving you a number. This data comes from the Statistical Institute of Belize. The source was from the Labor Force Survey of April 2021, and it's giving us an indication from under 1 years old in terms of age, all the way up to plus 70. So what we were discussing last week was, Sister Yaya said, the 36%, which is this number, doesn't truly give us an indication as to what that number is. But that physical number in terms of person is 155,408. Under the age of 70.
What does that number represent?
That number represents persons under 17 years old and younger. And then the 272,440 represent persons 18 and above. So 63% of the population, 63% of the population is 18 years and older based on the data that was provided from SIB. Now, Sister Yaya had asked the question, what is the population from 11 to under, from 11 years old to under 1, And that would be where I just do a quick calculation and sum the totals. And that will give you 101,000 people from 11 years old to 5. We can't do it. So I have to make an adjustment as well to Sister Yaya, because we are not doing the entire population, because we are only doing from 11 to 5 years old. That is 59,757. And all we need to do is divide that by the total. And that would give us 14%, 13.9. So what I'm saying is that the population from 17 and below is 155,000 people based on the data that was provided by SIB. From 11 to 5 years old is 59,757 people, which accounts for 14% of the population. So we were talking about trying to make sure that our population reach the issue of herd immunity as it relates to the population that has to be vaccinated to reach a 70%. So we have to take 7% out of this total. So from 17 to 11 may give us that herd immunity versus the population from 5 to 11. Sister Yaya just wanted to get the totals in terms of the numbers. But if you want, I could go back over that, Sister Yaya, just to make sure that we get the clarity of what is required. Hello?
Yes, you could go ahead and run those numbers again.
Okay. We're saying is that from 17 to under 1 is 155,000 people. From 11 to 5 years old is 59,000 out of that 155. So it's just giving you a proportion of the population based on the age to give us a number rather than a percentage. Go ahead, Sister Yaya.
That's a part of a sidebar conversation. You know how that happens sometimes when you're having conversations. And so I want to know what those numbers were, because I don't think these are numbers we're getting from the Ministry of Health and Wellness. I don't even hear the wording herd immunity as much anymore. It could be because we may be so far away from it that it may not be practical. I don't know what the reasoning is. So thanks for taking the time to do that and for showing us how you do the calculations. So yes, now we can move back to workers' rights versus states' rights. After listening to reflecting on last week's conversation, Brother Tate, was there any important points that you wanted to make when we talk about workers' rights versus states' rights? I forgot to bring the one of my texts with me, and the point I was making is that from the 1600s, the original people who were on this property, known now as Belize, were always in control of land, labor, and commerce.
Capital,
trade, that has not changed. So if we know our history, then we would know that what we're dealing with is not since we got self-government or since we became politically independent. That's how the thing set. And so at no point from the research I have done has it ever been about truly decolonizing the processes to empower people to have a better quality of life. So since it's systematic, Brother Tate, what I look for is the quantitative number to see if there's any research over a period of time that shows the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, no matter which administration in power, based on numbers. So you called WB this week, and one of the conversation was about fuel, right?
sure.
And the point was made. Now, I don't understand the numbers. And this is an example of workers' right and state power. So your workers that are everyday people will use diesel, gasoline, kerosene,
Butane.
butane. These are workers' rights, right? The state power will be the entity that would have the stack of taxes, because, well, I know they got 3 stack of taxes. The state that allows the system to continue as it is, where you have the importer get like 3 bites out of the financial package. So you have your land tax, landed tax, I think it's called. Then you have, they could be franchise owners, so that they could say, listen, we want owner a gas station, we want owner independent truck, so we are cut out the middle person, so we don't need the trucker. When the fuel come in the depot, we are get we personal truck and move it to we personal gas station, and so then it cut out the middle people. The state allows that system to operate like that. And from what the independent gas station owner said, who was a guest, is that they have approached the state with a formula that will be more inclusive. So you have expertise sharing in, this is a formula that will be more equitable, and the state now want to hear that. So that's an example of workers' rights versus state power. But that's it. Make it richer now with the numbers.
I hear you, Sister Yaya, but I think the conversation that we need to have as it relates to fuel is the issue of how best we could make it as competitive, where because of the fact that Belize is a price taker, we just import the fuel and we add taxes to ensure that the fuel reaches a certain, government generates resources, taxes from taxes, and those taxes are used for government to pay government's bills. But you are talking about state power and workers' rights. And I think one of the most critical pieces of data that has been provided by the Statistical Institute of Belize had to do with poverty. I will get back to the fuel shortly, Sister Yaya. I'll get back to the fuel shortly. Pre the pandemic, in 2018, the poverty rate stood at 52% based on the data that was used to calculate the 2009 poverty levels, which was at 41.3%. So pre the pandemic,
numbers again.
Before the pandemic, in 2009, when the last country poverty assessment was done, and I needed to, and I should have gone and get the total in terms of numbers, Sister Yaya, and from the country poverty assessment that was done in 2009. But the only thing I remembered was the percentage. But we could always get the numbers because the document is available to give us the actual number. But SIB keeps quoting the data that is provided for the public to understand. From 41.3%, it went to 52% before the pandemic, pre the pandemic. Post the pandemic, which is what is happening now, we don't have that data updated to give us the indication of what the post-pandemic poverty assessment is. Now, there are, in the court of public opinion, there is saying 60 or 65%. So 2/3 of your population fall below the poverty line because of the circumstances caused by the pandemic and the virus. To be able to suggest that certain things need to be done, that is in relation to looking at the implication caused to workers, because your entire population is different than your employed population. So there's just the nuances of the different definitions that exist in order to be able to get people to understand what this means for workers. Now we come back to the fuel. Depending on where you sit.
How is poverty defined?
Poverty is defined either by expenditure or by income. And depending on where you measure it, whatever your income is generated in this country will determine if you fall above or below the poverty line. And the poverty line have a specific definition as well to be able to, because what is happening too is that that definition is also used based on international standard to be able to ensure that you can compare Belize with other countries and to see how we fit into this equation. But the conversation we're having as it relates to workers' rights versus state rights also include workers that exist in our population and society to be able to clearly understand what those numbers truly mean and how it affects our people. Because right now we're having a problem where, because so many people lost their jobs because the fact that tourism was such a significant contributor to our economy, then those people are unemployed and they are not making enough money. And even with all the support that is provided, those people cannot meet their obligations because they are unemployed.
Okay. I push back on the wording poverty. I prefer the word impoverishment because it's the economic system that created this global condition. I heard most talk this morning about a conversation when I have with the wealthiest person on planet Earth.
Well, Elon Musk.
And how, so it's not that people cannot be moved collectively, globally out of the condition of impoverishment. There are people who want the thing set so, and that may be hard for some people to hear or believe, but genuinely there are people who benefit from people being in impoverishment. And I think it's so important to have this conversation because there are people who could judge people who are impoverished, such as, there's a fundraiser right now to bring home the body of an inner city youth. And people would look at that youth and make judgment on that youth, not having any compassion to understand that you're born into generations of impoverishment. There really is only so much you can do, as much as you may try. And so it's to understand these systems of colonization. So I just wanted to put in that 2 cents about the use of the word impoverishment as opposed to, poverty or the poverty line. Excellent point you've made, Brother Dean. You got anything to say? He never studied with tonight,
Yeah. No, I'm listening in. Yeah. I'm listening. I'm learning. Always interesting to hear Brother Tate on the different statistics. And I really appreciate the numbers that he provided tonight because, and I'm sorry to go back, but there was a suggestion that we would never reach herd immunity because of the age of the population, and so that kind of helped to put it in perspective as to whether or not that is attainable. And from the looks of things, it would seem that in fact that that may be attainable. As it relates now to the conversation concerning poverty, again, on point in terms of what you say, Yaya, in terms of people burning into impoverishment and others profiting as a result of that. And there are those, of course, those who
We get a lot of feedback from Brother Dean. Like static feedback.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
Work on getting a static feedback.
Yeah.
It could be the headphone.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. So what I was saying is that when you speak of that there are those who enjoy or who want to see people impoverished and who profit from seeing people impoverished, I think that is a true statement and that is a reality and that is reflective of our political system today. And I would be fooled to say that I am totally convinced that there is one elected representative out of the 31, or that there is one that has ever been elected that has had as their primary mission to remove people out of poverty. Because those who profit the most out of this impoverishment that you're referring to is our elected leaders.
Well, one of the things that I said at the beginning of the show is that's the system that was inherited from the 1600s. And no one had any serious reform to change it.
True, Sister Yaya, but I think like everything else we have in terms of understanding the history of where we were, where we are, and where we would like to go, requires us to do some kind of analysis to be able to assess how it is that people can make a difference for us to be able to find solutions to some of these issues. If I do not know my rights, workers' rights, then the reality is that I cannot protect those rights because, as you said, the nature of the system is to be able to push back in terms of what's happening now. Public officers lost 10% of their income, but that's just from salary. We don't include the 2.5% because public officers thus far has lost 15% of their income from the last administration to this administration. That has a negative effect and an impact on workers in this country. 1, 2. And each worker, that 15% is of a greater value, even though those who made less than $12,000 a year weren't affected. The fact is that as you are at the lower level of the scale, when it comes to under 12,000, it will affect you more than others who are above 12,000. So what we are saying is that the impact of these things, now we are looking at the Belizean context. In the developed world context, the president of the United States is trying to throw money in the economy. They are doing things to help people who are suffering because of the recession caused by the pandemic, while Belize is cutting back. Yes, we don't have the fiscal space, but it's affecting people's ability to eat. It's affecting people's ability to pay their bills. And I'm not saying government policies may not be the right policy, but what is happening to workers is that people who do not have the capacity to understand what is being done are forced to take a prescription that may not necessarily be in their best interest. So we have to fight to ensure that we work to educate our people for them to understand what these things truly mean to them.
Valid. What did you mean when you said even those who are making less than 12,000 would be more impacted?
Government made a decision after we explained to them that the implication of doing a 12.5% cut across the board from pay scale 1 to pay scale 30, which are all the pay scales in the public service. Those persons at the lower end of the pay scale from 1 to 12,000, from pay scale 1 to say 12,000, those people making under $12,000 will be more affected by a 10% cut than those above it. Even though if you're close to 12,000, you will still feel the impact. But that was a decision made by the government of Belize. Workers need to understand that their rights, you have to understand your rights. If you do not know your rights, then when public policies are implemented like this, in a time of a pandemic that hasn't existed for the last 100 years, then government decisions have to be made to ensure that it helps the least amongst us that can survive the pandemic, because it has been going on 2 years plus, from March of 2020 to November of 2021, we are still going through the pandemic and people are suffering, people are hurting, and we have to figure out a way of how it is as a society to be able to help some of those people. They have bills to pay, they have children to feed, they have commitments that they have to fulfill. And the moment you start to cut away from what they have, that causes more stress and pain on people. And we haven't seen the effect of these things yet, but it's coming, Sister Yaya. Unfortunately, I don't mean to be a prophet of doom, but these things have implications, no?
Well, there's certain people who haven't seen it. And then there's certain people who live it every day. And so when you're in those communities, it's a total different vibration. It really bring a vibration down when you see people not a smile, when you know people hungry and still have pride, when you see people do things what they never made it do before, when you see people, I mean, you know what, to beg somebody for food or for
Pay bill.
pay a bill for your
Bring my
light,
brother
for your
home from Mexico.
you know what, for the family wait because they never want beg, then they try keep their dignity for bring home a youth body.
Yes.
And it's not one family. I mean, families were living like this before COVID-19.
It just got worse.
And then the price of goods, I mean, things that people eat were packaged or not healthy in the first place, they go up like every day. And we complain about it. But I agree. People need to understand, like people need to say. And this is where the union get a lot of hit because people feel like the union didn't do a good job communicating with people so people could understand what happened if government not listen to what we were telling. And I think one of we still not understand what the union was saying to the government at the time.
True. But unfortunately, Sister Yaya, when 60% of the population have primary school or less, and you're trying to explain to them, and I'm not saying people don't have common sense and people can't rationally figure out what is happening to them until it hits their pocket. My hypothesis now, this is only Philip Tate's opinion. It may be wrong, but I will put it out there anyway. If you don't make a certain income in this country, Sister Yaya, and the median income in this country is about $1,200 for male and about $900 for female, male and female.
That's
this is monthly.
Per month?
Per month. $1,200 for male, $900 for female. Now, if you are making $12,000, if you are making median income is $1,200 a month, and you have if you have multiple children, because most households have about 4.2 persons in one household. That's the average. That may not necessarily be the norm. Some people have no fathers and more children and a mother, because it's rare when the mother will abandon their children, but she has to take care of the responsibility of her children. So when you look at the households in this country, and the point you brought home is clear, the more mouths you feed and the less resources you have, it gives you it puts tremendous amount of pressure on that household to be able to meet the obligation. And all we were trying to explain to public officers, and remember now, public officers in this country get income every 15th and every ending. Some people get it monthly, but most people apply to get income consistently to be able to meet the obligations and so forth. So when you cut that back, it cuts back on people's ability to be able to meet the obligations, and you have to make some adjustments. But the reality is that we have to explain to people that these policies that are being implemented and how it affects you means that you have skin in the game. You have a reason to get involved, so that when the decisions are made that affects you, you can say, but no, hold on, man. Hold on. You affect me more so than ever, including my children. And that is why we want people engagement, for them to participate in this conversation, so that if all of we could get involved, then we don't have a problem to say that is the best policy, because I don't know where they affect you, Sister Yaya. You don't know where they affect me. But when you bring your voice to the table, it then means that we can have a consensus easier, that then enables us to say, this is the best course of action for this problem in order to find a meaningful solution that will get people through. Because from March of 2020 to November of 2021, that's a lot of pain, Sister Yaya, a lot of pain for people.
Yeah,
Make
if I
I
may
get
just
Brother Dean
jump
before we
in,
go to the
yeah,
participants.
I want to make 2 points. I want to say what is the purpose of our embassies and our ambassadors. We have a resident ambassador in Mexico. I believe in the name of Oscar Arnau. And I want to say tonight that it's a damn shame when any citizen is stranded, whether dead or alive, in a foreign country. The duty of of the ambassador and the embassy is to get that citizen back home at whatever cost. That's his purpose there, not to drink tequila if he drinks any at all. And so when I heard about that family that needed $3,000, I want to say shame on the ambassador of Belize to Mexico. It's a damn shame on you because you had a duty, you have a duty and a responsibility to get that brother home. When I visited Mexico for my Shenzhen visa or whatever,
Schengen,
I
yeah.
had to leave my passport, and it was the duty of the embassy to get me back home. And they did that under Oliver Del Cid, Ambassador Oliver Del Cid. And that took one phone call and a visit to the embassy. They had that duty and that obligation to give me a document for me to get back home while my passport would come back in the mail. And so I want to again call out the ambassador of Mexico and say shame on you and your entire staff and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. If it is that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was aware of the situation because they're getting paid to attend to citizens. The other thing, yeah, I want to comment on your statement where you said that the union or the perception and the reality that people felt the union did a terrible job at explaining the impact of government's decision, austerity decisions and the austerity measures that were effective. I want to also speak to the workers who are not public sector workers. I want to say to the workers, whether they're in the citrus industry, the banana sector, the banking sector, the insurance sector, Belize have a low density of unionization, but it does not removes the duty of all workers in whatever sector you are to unite and do your part to ensure that workers in this country and citizens of this country are treated fairly. I can tell you that in other Caribbean countries, every single sector got a union, yeah, including insurance, including banking. Look at what happened to our brothers at First Caribbean Bank, at Scotia Bank. Um, uh, there is no representation. Yes, some of them were or belong to CWU, but all in all, the banking industry have no representation. And while people think dressing up in a necktie and a pretty suit that was a nice thing, that now a slave trade all in and of itself. I was there and I could tell you that. And I was doing offshore banking. I can tell you local banking is worse because you work long, tedious hours for pittance. For pittance. So I feel for all tellers, especially the tellers who do the bulk of the work, they're not taking home any serious money. But so while they're looking at other unions or existing unions to organize for and on their behalf, they also have a duty to organize. So all we have one duty and a responsibility to inform ourselves and organize ourselves in our different profession or in our different
Sectors.
communities or sectors. Thank you.
Respect, brother. I don't want to preempt me big news tomorrow. I'm hosting WB tomorrow. But suffice it for say, with Yaya and the creator and the ancestors, forward movement make for the family. We still not meet the financial goal, but big forward movement on the process of how the body will come home for sure. So it's 8:35. It's time for the participants to hold the mic. Brother Dean, it's your part where you start.
Okay, okay, participants and even those that may be logged on, please feel free to join the conversation. If you have a copy of the flyer, the link to the Zoom platform is there. I want to say good night to everybody here. I see Brother Gibson, Sister Hannah, Sister Meander, Sister Melina, Perla Koba. I encourage you to participate in the conversation. The second half of the show is whereby we engage with the participants, or whereby we allow the participants to make contributions or ask questions. So the floor is yours, if there is anybody that would like to immediately jump in.
Hi, good night.
Good night, Melina.
Can you guys hear me? Let
Loud and
me
clear, loud and clear.
Yes.
start my video. Hi. Thank you guys for the very informative session. I was listening in on last week's session as well, and I feel like we needed more information too. So thank you for this follow-up. I work in the private sector, not the public sector, but I'm trying to educate myself and trying to understand, you know, as a young person who votes and who wants to be able to help and understand, you know, how I can use whatever resources I have, whether it be through networking. And that's why that's part of my question is, how do we connect the two to be able to help? Like in my job, I do a lot of hiring and I do job searching. I've been recently trying to hire for a couple positions, and it's been hard. We get hundreds of applicants. You know, we choose maybe a top 10. Some show up and they start the job and then they leave. It's very difficult to get people, but I was wondering what I know that we can maybe do something else to try to connect these networks so that people who don't have that, you know, some people are born into the class and they're born with the privilege of these networks that they have just gained simply by luck. There has to be a way to share that and be able to benefit people, and that can go a long way, because we know that it's who you know a lot of times, not necessarily the skills that you have to be able to do a job, right? So there are skills.
Or who know you?
Exactly. There are very, very many skilled people who don't have the opportunity simply because they don't know the right people. And I know that has been a problem. Some people live in a very tight bubble, and they are not seeing the need, or they're not seeing the people to reach out to. And that's a disconnect. Maybe people want to help people who are in positions to be able to help, whether it be, you know, through hiring or by some other means. How do we think about making it easier to network and connect these people?
Which sector, Sister Melina?
Private sector, stationary.
Stationary, yes, because the specificity is extremely important, because we are looking, and you talk about network. The Labor Department have tried to put a database in place that would look at all the levels of qualified Belizeans in this country. The police department hired a space for 220 police officers. They got over 2,000 applicants for 220 positions. So that just shows you where we are in terms of the unemployment and the segment of our population from, say, 14, even though we shouldn't be working at 14 because you're still a child. Say from 14 to 24, that's the largest segment of the unemployed population of this country. And if you think the 11% is bad, they are even worse. I think they're closer to 24, 25%. But the question you ask is extremely important in terms of bringing together people to be able to have access to a database or to be able to upload, because what has happened now with the technology and because of the pandemic, like for example, if you want a job in the public service, you go to the Ministry of Public Service website, upload your data, And then they will have that available in their database so that if you meet the requisite requirements, they can call you. And we need something like that to be able to ensure, to create that network that, because a lot of people who are employed or unemployed in the private sector that do have qualifications, because recently there was a conversation with the Minister of Education and Dr. Aaron Lewis talking about the issue of the brain drain. And it was from the University of the West Indies in Barbados at Cave Hill, who hosted the presentation. And they were saying is that how it is that I could come home and link into a system similar to what you're asking. We have to create the enabling environment. And I think the Labor Department is the best place for us to be able to address this and to see how best we could bring those persons together that have the capacity with those jobs that are available. No?
That are available, yeah.
My concern is that a big part of this issue is trust. Because you could create that system, and we know even people who are submit and eligible in a public service, as it has been said under the past administration, they have one individual, that individual labor minister by default. I understand within an hour that person could get that Belmopan, and if vacancy were there, that person for. So even if you have systems in place, if you don't have credible people, then you get frustrated, you're in debt if you choose to get higher education or certification in any way. And you only have limited funds, and especially if you don't live in Belize City. So I don't know how much of that is needed, or we really need to look at entrepreneurship as opposed to depending on someone to give us a job, because it's there's only so many jobs. There are less jobs than there are workers. Someone told me, who was working for a community-based organization, listen, I hire some people for do a couple of days of physical labor, and they show up and say they want work, but then people are serious for work, and you hear this regularly, and it's not always not true. Sometimes the people who need the money seriously don't want to work. And I'll always stay up, but someone will really do stay up.
Part of the conversation, I believe, to Yaya, Sister Yaya, is the fact that one of the things in this country is that we have been asking for the depoliticization of the public service, because the political parties are very dominant in this country. They determine, and you said there is a parallel system of hiring people within the public service that is accepted by the public service or the Ministry of the Public Service. Where is the Ministry of Public Service in all of this to be able to ensure that those parallel system doesn't exist? So we have been asking for the depoliticization of the public service to be able to ensure that there are certain systems that could work, that can work independent of the political parties, that serve the interests of their members first, and then the rest of the population. But at some point in time, when you get elected and you have to serve both sides of the aisle. That might be utopic, but the reality is that we as a people have to ask for our political parties to step back and allow the system to work. As Sister Melina was saying, how do we get a network where when you have the requisite qualification, you fit into that system, and then everybody can view it, that enables you to get a job in a fair manner?
Sister Melina, question. Is there a specific reason why you can't retain, or why people aren't being retained in that sector? Have you been able to identify why is it you're not able to retain individuals in that sector?
Not sure. This isn't a problem that we always have. It's more of a recent problem. So we have looked internally to say, okay, when there's a lot of turnover in one position, you have to look and see, is there a problem with the pay? Maybe it's not enough for the job that you're doing. And so we have done, we looked into that. We're not really sure why, because what we, basic store clerk positions, and we pay above minimum wage, and it's fair But what I think is part of the issue is, again, maybe not looking in the right direction. Maybe, we used to work with labor department also to get certain people, but I think the vetting system is also needed, as to what Sister Yaya was mentioning. Sometimes it's not a perfect fit. Sometimes the person who you're working for is not right, or the person who eventually gets the job, they are not what they say they are. So a vetting system would be good if such a thing was created. With Uber, for example, you can rate your driver and your driver can rate you to see what kind of experience it was. And maybe we do something like that, or that can be part of the conversation, where you rate a business. Your employees get the chance to rate a business, and people can rate other people too. Like, if you're looking for a plumber, just today I was looking through Facebook, and they're asking the same questions. I'm in need of a good plumber, or in need of a good, someone who paints or does, a bunch of odd jobs. And there isn't really, to my knowledge, other than the labor department and maybe what you guys have in the public service union. But unless you know to go to those places, you're not being connected with the people who do need jobs, and maybe the right people.
Do you all have a space for employees to speak freely about their work experience with the employer?
Yeah, we believe we do.
And Sister Melina is in HR, it seems. So that in itself, and the question Brother Dean asked, is extremely relevant to be able to get feedback both ways. I don't think we're at Uber yet, but I think it's something we need to work towards. Because Sister Yaya spoke about the issue of the conversation as it pertains to technology. One of the issues in this country is the gap in terms of access, because it restricts a significant amount of children. Like, for example, right now we're having online school, but not everybody in the classroom are able to have access to the classroom virtually, because they don't have the technology or they don't have the data to log on to the system. So that restricts those persons to have access. So the digital gap in this country is an issue that has to be addressed for people to be able to catch up. One. Two, Sister Melina is in HR. So the hope is that creating those systems that we need for the private sector or the public sector, because even within the public sector, there is still a need to be able to ensure that those parallel HR systems don't usurp what the system should be. But we hope that some of these things and some of these ideas, and Sister Melina, thanks very much for participating, but we need more people from the private sector to get involved, for the workers of this country to understand their role, responsibility, and rights that they have, so that when the problems that they face come up, where do I go to make a complaint? How do we fix the system for the benefit of the majority? Because of the number of unemployed people in this country, and where they can register to be able to see how best they could look for a job, and figure out how best we could place people. And then with, as you said, the ratings are there and all the other things that we could do. I'll leave it there for now. Sister Yaya?
Yeah, let me just make a final point on this, Brother T, and Sister Yaya. My final comment on this is that workers also need to understand that sometimes these jobs can be used. You have to use things to your advantage and use these things as a stepping stone. You'd be surprised that working in stationery can prepare you for bigger things, meaning that it could improve your sales skills, because now you're interacting with customers. It could improve your interpersonal relationship with people in terms of how you communicate. And once you're able to master those skills, whether it is in sales or communicating with people, you're able to move on up or out of that environment and into a bigger environment that also pays more. Sometimes we have to creep before we walk, and sometimes we get into these jobs and we feel that, well, the pay not good enough, and so I'm going to leave. But people have to understand that nothing is wrong. No job, absolutely no job that one bad job, none, because every job has its advantages. But we have to understand that if we have a goal, if we have an idea where we want to go, then we can use all these what we would consider smaller jobs before we reach to our big job. That's my final comment on that. I I I, I will continue also by saying this is the segment whereby we allow our participants to make a contribution as a question. And so I want to remind those that are with us tonight that you're free to jump in at any time to make your contributions on tonight's on any topic of discussion or related to the conversation that we had tonight.
Melina, let me ask, what's, as an employer, what is your company's position on unionizing your workers?
I'm not sure I'm too qualified I'm not sure about that. We're maybe like a small to medium sized business. We started maybe about 30 years ago, but as a small business. So we're just getting to, the limited, company limited, and some things have been slowly starting. I would be from the messages that have come down, from management, I would say that they are all up for informing our employees. We've had conversations too with Labor Department to come and give presentations, because oftentimes we find that our own employees don't know what their rights are. And we go through, what your holiday should be, how many hours you have to work, and so on, sick days. And we go through like a little training. But you'd be surprised to know that a lot of people just don't have that. They don't even know what to ask most times. Mm-hmm. And I guess it's the same, in the public sector as well. People are not prepared because we were not prepared from high school to ask these questions. The relevancy in terms of what we learned to what we can actually use in real life and when we go out in the working field, it's not relevant. So we do have a very open we have open conversations about these things, and we would be open if we're at that size and we're considering it. Yeah, definitely, to unionize.
Is there a certain amount of employees you have to unionize your workers, Brother Dean, Brother Tate?
I don't think there's a minimum.
No.
Buddy?
No, there's no minimum, Sister Yaya. All that you need to do is to ensure that if and when you seek a representative or you want to unionize, and by unionizing, of course, you then have an entity that represents you, whether it's a new union or otherwise. As we saw recently with the KHNH union, they decided to form their own union rather than go to one of the existing unions. All that poll needed to yield was a 50+1 of all the employees. They would take a poll, and once the poll reflects that 50+1 of the employees, and that's percentage wise, would want to be represented, then that's a go for the Labor Advisory Board. They would have to then grant those workers. Yeah, that question that you asked, Melina, I'd really like for you to put that question to the people in the call centers.
You know, the union leader, you want to ask them, then people might listen to me. When I tell them, no, I could do a whole theater production on call centers. Man.
Intimidation and fear, Sister Yaya. Just like the banking sector. Just like the banking sector. But I didn't mention the issue of the tellers. Remember what happened with respect to Scotiabank when Scotia left and it went to Belize Bank. The conversation was that they would have a job for 12 months. They were also approaching CW to see if they could represent them for the transition. Well, someone got to the employees of the Scotiabank when Scotia left, and that was squashed. We don't want a union here. We will take care of you. We will abuse you if we want. We can do as we please. And those people backed away because of the fact that they probably was intimidated to see that even though you have rights within the laws of this country to unionize, because of the fact that the person who represents the 50+1, obviously we have to get rid of that person because we don't want unions in this place, because then we have to put out our financials, we have to give information to the union to get collective bargaining going. Too much headache. And that has always been the case. And Sister Yaya, the state issues versus the workers' rights is the clear case of where we are. In other jurisdictions within the Caribbean, there is also a labor court that exists specifically for laborers. Belize doesn't have one as yet. So all these things put together, and Sister Melina pointed out very clearly, sometimes people do not know their own rights or the questions to ask about their rights to protect it so that it is not impeded or infringed on, so that you do not get affected. So if you don't know, then the employer can do as they please.
We have 3 minutes to 8. So if there's anybody who has not shared it and feel that they must say something in the next minute and a half, this is your chance. Okay, Brother Tate, your final thoughts?
Sister Yaya, I am.
Allow me to say something, please.
Oh, sure.
The whole thing of workers' rights, I think, needs to be defined. What are workers' rights in Belize? And I just mentioned that in the context of, if you look at what is called the gross national income or the national income of this country, and how that is divided, and what workers, portion of that goes to workers in the context again of poverty or impoverishment, you will see that there is a growing gap between what goes to the investor, so to speak, employer, as against what goes to workers. I thought that the discussion would have gone in that direction, but I see it also it still comes back, and I've gone back to looking at what are workers' rights and awareness of workers' rights. But I think there is a need to educate people on basically what are workers' rights, because there's no doubt, based on the cases you cited, and if you look at banana industry and other areas, unionization is a thing that is anathema to these people. They don't want it. They bring in workers from the outside because they can pay them lesser wages and so on. Well, these are the things, some of the things that we need to look at in the context of what we're looking at right now. Workers' rights in the context of national income, the Belize national income, which is your GDP, and the national income derived from that, how that breaks down, what accrues to workers. Just a brief intervention.
Thanks, Brother David. Final thoughts, Brother Tate?
Point well said, Brother Gibson. I will work on that so that I could share the information. I believe Sister Melina pointed out very clearly that workers need to understand, and Brother Gibson mentioned the issue of how do we define this for people to truly understand. That definition can be done because I think some of the data is available. Not all of it is available, but some of it is. And the hope is that we can get people to keep engaged in the show and ask those relevant questions that are needed so that we can find solutions to the problem and present those facts to people in a manner that they could understand what it means to them. Because the private sector has their own responsibility. Yes, it's to profit and to make an acceptable rate of return, but they also have a responsibility to their workers as well, that a fair day's wage for fair days work for a fair day's wage.
Respect, brother. Dean, final thoughts. We're already
Yes.
at 8 o'clock.
Okay, my final thoughts is thanks, brother Gibson, for your contribution as usual, always captivating. And one of the thoughts that came to my mind is I think that we've also let the Ministry of Labor off the hook. I think and I think that the Ministry of Labor needs to be depoliticized. While we may have to have a Minister of Labor, that department needs to really function as an autonomous department, and labor officers who are on the ground needs to start speaking to these different sectors of workers about their rights and the benefits behind unionizing, because that is their duty to protect and to advise the workforce. And so I think that we have to put much more pressure in seeing how we can depoliticize the labor department, because even as I speak, as a public sector worker, if it is that workers try to go after the government, you could reach some roadblocks if it is that you need to go through the labor department, simply because if the situation would be sensational, then you would see that you wouldn't get the kind of support that you have to receive in accordance with the law from the labor department. So again, final thought again, Sister Yaya, please allow me. Just a million of people, sometimes they don't, not only do they not know their rights, but they don't even know sometimes what to ask to be able to inform themselves. Brother Mose and several people always say people are caught up in trying to make a dollar, that they don't pay attention to these issues that affect their everyday life. But I will say that I don't buy that all the time, because people do find the time to watch tennis finals, basketball every night, football, talk or Messi and Ronaldo and then nonsense. Those people can offer you nothing other than perhaps, I mean, if you're an athlete and you want to be inspired, you can be inspiration, but stop wasting your time on that and start focusing on reading books and participating in sessions like these that will help you grow personally and professionally. Thank you, Yaya, and thanks for everybody who contributed tonight.
No, I don't go ahead. All we were saying, no. I could say having balance. They think that will ease people. I remember what he name? The Gail. Gail said, oh no, I have to look at them people smoke weed, you know. You know what kind of society that we have that people don't smoke their weed? So whatever outlet people have, I look for balance. You know, I want to do that, you could do that, but just telling people no and make people change with look at, I need the numbers, guys. I just want, I don't know how much time this week I don't say 60% of the working population of Belize have a primary school education. I need the numbers, but I see it. Once I get Sankey, I was sing it, and I have international conversations so that people understand the culture of people in Belize when you talk about community engagement and community empowerment. So thanks everybody for being with us. This was absolutely beautiful. We're 3 minutes over our designated time, but no problem that we run things. I have to get home though. So everyone stay safe, and I'll see you all next week. Tune to WEB that morning because I'm the host.
Yes.
You bet, you bet, you bet.
That's a given.
Good night. And Melina,
night.
I see your comment about TikTok, and we have to discuss that because we're at World School.
That's the thing. You're hearing numbers, and I have to pull the numbers. Brother Tate, send the numbers to me again about the 12-year-olds. That are the largest population that are 12-year-olds. And when I get moments like this, I know I was about WBI overexposed as it is, but we have to make much of a moment here because of a different audience you have. And I'll make sure I put out a flyer for direct people to this space. So the notice Sister Muslim not there. She's vacationing. Happy Friday, not vacation enough. But everybody else have a good night, man.
Okay. Good night.
Thanks everybody for participating.
Thanks,
Have a
Jay.
good night.
Thanks.
Mrs. Martinez, thanks for coming.
Good night.
Good night.